Christopher Herman. In the fandom, I'm known as OtakuSquirrel, and I customize pony toys. My little thing in the fandom is that I sculpt show-accurate manes and tails for the standard-size brushable toys. Do we have any other young ones in the audience that want a prize? We still have prizes. Come on, get a prize. It looks like we still have a pony and some clay, and we also have a box deck with some cards. And anyone that wants one of these little DVDs, take them as you want.
Oh, this is awesome.
Yeah. Okay. I still have some clay as prizes, and I have one more pony with... Do you want a pony with some clay? Customize a toy pony. Yeah, I've got some more clay you can have for the clay. Yes? Okay, I'm out of ponies, and I still have one grand prize box set. So, anyway, we're here to talk about customizing toys. So when I got involved in the fandom, maybe about 2.5 years ago, I was looking for something to do, and I started off with some random stuff, but when Hasbro released a gift set, and it had a Twilight Sparkle, a Pinkie Pie, and an Applejack with sculpted hair, they didn't have the other three. So everyone was going crazy trying to find people to sculpt hair for them, for their standard brushables. And I have a standard brushable here. Tangled doll hair, it gets tied in knots. Poor Rarity would die if anyone saw her like this. It is. And so really what started out as an idea to finish the set with Rainbow Dash, Fluttershy, and Rarity, as soon as I started getting a couple sculpts out there, I had people asking me if I could sell these. And then I went on a whole different tangent with resin casting and making copies of my sculpts and everything. And that's a whole different topic. But really, what I want to do is, because I'm just tired of making all of these ponies, I've probably done about 150 to 200 custom ponies now. Since I'm really tired of doing them, I want to encourage other people to give it a shot, because I'd never sculpted anything before this. It really was something that once you start practicing and you try it, it's really not as hard as it seems. But there are some technical aspects to it, and you have to know where to start. So basically, I'm going to just, oh, yeah? You need to cut off the hair, and then you get to slap the clay on top. Yeah. So really, I'm going to talk about the steps for customizing a pony toy, some of the stuff that you can do, and then if you have questions, I'm just going to kind of follow where the flow of the questions go. If people want to know more about certain aspects or whatnot, we'll just cover that. So yeah, are there any questions to start with? Yeah? How do I do it? That's a great question. In fact, let's just get rolling with this. So first off, me being the 37-year-old man that I am without kids, I have to brave the pink aisle of the toy store, and I have to go in there and actually buy a pony. My first pony that I ever bought was an Applejack, and she eventually got turned into Daring Do, who's obviously my favorite character. Yeah, and that's the great thing about this. And I don't have a few of my characters here, but some of them get totally repainted, so there's a lot more complexities. But the first step, and this is kind of why I was giving away a couple single ponies with tangled hair and some bits of clay. The hardest part is taking that toy that you just braved the pink aisle for and then ruining it. I mean, you got to chop off the hair. And it's pretty straightforward once you kind of realize that it's just a $5 toy. You take scissors, clip off the tail, push anything that remains into inside the pony, and then up top it's a little bit harder, but if you get nail clippers, especially like infant nail clippers, they're really sharp, they're really tiny, and you can clip off everything up top. I've done this a lot. I default to a hobby knife at this point, so I'm pulling tension on the hair and then just cutting it off really close. You can not worry too much. You're going to get this little bit of a ridge here, and it's going to look bad, but you're going to be putting clay on top of it, so it's not that big of a deal. But the big first step is wrecking your $5 toy and making them bald. After that, the next step really is grabbing some clay, and that's the other thing that I was giving out here. And this is Sculpey 3. And each type of clay, whether it's original Sculpey, I think Fimo and Sculpey 3, there's tons of different types of polymer clay. A polymer clay really is just kind of like a type of plastic, and you cook it and it's going to solidify. They're all a little bit different, and people ask me a lot, what's your preference? And I'm going to tell you right now, it doesn't matter. It's going to be whatever you learn with, because you're going to be familiar with it. Your hands are going to know how it's going to heat up, how it's going to soften, what it takes to cool down and harden up a little bit. What you learn with, really, it's some stuff, if you're going to spend a lot of money on clay, it's going to make a difference. But I'm just using Sculpey. Honestly, you just learn to use it by practice. And it doesn't completely dry unless you bake it. So you can mess up and learn. And that's the fun part about this project is when I started this project, I was horrible. I did some really bad stuff that looked terrible. But after a few shots, I wasn't wasting the material because, you give it a shot, it doesn't look good, you pull it off the pony, you ball it up again in your hands, and you start over. It's all about giving it a shot. And when you start learning how it works and how the material works and all that sort of stuff, it's really kind of easy. And even if you don't get it perfect, I'll talk about some of the steps you can take to kind of refine your work. If I start going too fast here, just stop me with a question. So the next big thing is people get concerned once they've put the clay on the pony about baking the clay with the pony in the oven. There's instructions on the Sculpey for baking it. I'm going to see if it says here. Do not microwave. That's important. Do not microwave. So right here, 275 degrees, 15 minutes per quarter inch. That basically means 15 minutes for the scale that we're working in. The ponies, they get a little jiggly like Jell-O when you're baking them in the oven. If you're concerned, you pull them out of the oven, you're watching them wobble back and forth, and you're like, oh, is that pony going to tip over and go? Ah. Well, I've never had a pony tip over on me and end up in all sort of contorted positions. It hasn't happened. But definitely do not fiddle with the pony while they're too warm. You're probably gonna burn your fingers. But yeah, bad things will happen if you start fiddling with the pony. But if you want to do some extreme customizations, maybe you do want to fiddle it with it. In which case, use heat-proof gloves, because then you could change the position of the wings and all sorts of stuff. Anyway, I haven't done too much of that. But yeah, for baking the clay, the ponies, they don't turn into a puddle of goo or anything. They just get a little wobbly. Once they cool down, it's all good. So adult supervision, yes. But really, you just put them in on like a cookie sheet, maybe put a little bit of tin foil underneath them, pop it in the oven for the 15 minutes at the right temp, and just let it cool until it's cool to the touch. And then you end up with something. My half-finished sculpts look terrible. So, like right here, this is a Sculpey, something that I've been working on. That's a derpy sculpt. And then I have a partially started little Luna sculpt from the very first two-parter pilot. So, she's not balanced. But my work, one of the things you'll know is my finished products here look very refined. And like my little Luna here, it's a very rough sculpt. One of the things I do differently than many people, and you can do this both ways. A lot of people do the sculpting all in one process. So they'll try to get all the details in there all at one time. And what I found, and I think where a lot of people get a hang up, is as you're trying to sculpt the details in one area, well, that clay's not completely solid. It's going to shift around a little bit, and you're going to screw up something over on that part of the sculpt, or you're going to accidentally stick your finger somewhere and it's going to put an indent in it. I don't even try to fight it. I'll bake it, and then if you look at my sculpt here, and I know you can't see, but you're all welcome to come up and look at this stuff after I stop jabbering at you all the time. But I will do a rough sculpt, and then I pull out my hobby knife, and then I'll do a little bit of carving, and then I'll add another little bit of material, fill in any low spots, add details. But really what I'm doing is I'm building up a base, and then I improve it. And through that method of sculpting, baking, carving, sculpting, baking, carving, and then once I get something which I'm almost really happy with, I pull out the sandpaper and sand it down. I'm able to get a lot of very fine detail in here. And one of the challenges, of course, my DJ Pony is one of my favorites. One of the challenges with that is, it takes a lot of time. I spent 6 weeks working on Fluttershy. On the flip side, I did Rainbow Dash in about a week. And that's just because if you feel good about where the sculpt is going, you can visualize how it's progressing, it goes really quick. And at a certain point, I decided to do insane things like sculpt sunglasses that were removable. So, so really, the best thing about, the best advice for customizing the toys that I can give anyone is really just give it a go. If you get it wrong, you're not out much of anything. It's a $5 pony toy and some clay, and the clay you can use again and again and again. Any kind of questions about how to do this at this point? Yeah. For the greater part, and this is what I'll show you a little bit of what I'm doing differently. So for my derpy sculpt here, it's 80% done, needs still some finishing. I have basically a barbecue skewer, so a little wood dowel that I've sculpted the tail onto, and where her tail was, the doll hair was attached right there. So for me, I just put the tail right where it used to be. And that wooden dowel that I'm sculpting to, it's the right size. Barbecue skewers, like I said, if they're bamboo, they like to splinter a lot. It doesn't matter, you don't see it in the long run. When I'm done, you can glue it right in place. But the nice thing about this is I can pull it out, so if I'm painting this later on, or like I've done with my other ones, if I'm making a silicone mold so I can do multiple resin castings, then I can pull it off the pony and I can just make the resin castings of what I want. And glue it when it's finished. Some of mine here, if I check, some of them aren't even glued on at this point. When I've done the resin casting, it's basically something I can slide right on and it's done. The hair I usually super glue. I recommend super glue because it's a better glue than just hot glue is just a mess most of the time. Super glue, if you do use super glue, it comes in different types. Gap filling super glue is it's a thicker super glue, so it's not going to drip down the pony. Some of the worst things you could do is get something looking perfect and all of a sudden stick it on there with glue and have a big glob of glue drip down the pony's face and you wreck everything. And I have wrecked everything on multiple ponies that I've been working on. If you're just doing a one-shot sculpt where you're just sculpting like the hair onto the pony, when you bake it, most of the time that hair is going to adhere pretty well to the pony. I have it removable and I go out of my way to make sure it's removable because I'm looking to do the resin casting. So that's just been one of those things. What I'm doing would be a lot easier if I wasn't concerned about making it removable for that resin casting. So, so for the hair, like I said, if you're baking it straight on there, it's probably not coming off. Yeah. Yes?
When you're baking it, do you usually have the barbecue thing there?
Yeah, when I'm baking the piece that's for the tail, the barbecue skewer is inside the tail and it's pretty much attached. The little wooden dowel, it's not going to catch fire. It's not hot enough. So no worries with that one. But yeah, I do bake that also. Mm-hmm. The hats are really complicated. Actually, Applejack's hat was pretty easy. I took some Sculpey and I put it on a piece of tin foil that was flat, no wrinkles or anything in it. And I rolled out just a thin piece of it. And then I used that for the bottom of her hat. And what I did was I then took an Applejack with her hair and then I shaped it above her head and then I baked it. So I had the base of her base of her hat. Yeah, Applejack's fat. I had too many apples. So I had the base of her hat and I had it in the approximate shape before I even tried to sculpt the top of her hat onto it or cut out the bite in her hat. So that was all done separately. And again, if you're sculpting that onto the piece, it's easier because you can see what you're doing and all that sort of stuff. My other gimmick here is I've got magnets on Apple Bloom's bow and on Applejack's head, so Apple Bloom can wear the hat. This Applejack doesn't have a piece of metal embedded into the resin mane, so she won't wear anything, but that's why she's mine as opposed to something I sell. Yeah. The paints, I'm mainly using apple barrel acrylics. They're cheap. They're readily available at Michael's or whatever your local craft store is, and they come in a good variety of colors. They're not the cheapest, I should say, they're not the worst of quality paints, but it's one of those things where you can make them work. I mean, all the colors on these, except for maybe a couple different colors here and there, is all apple barrel acrylics. And that kind of leads into another aspect of painting them. When I make my sculpts, I go to a lot of trouble to do, the fine detail work and sanding, and I get everything super smooth. The apple barrel acrylics, any acrylic really, if you're just painting it straight out of the bottle, it's going to be clumpy. It's what you want to do is water it down a little bit, or use a thinning agent that's meant for acrylics. I'm cheap. I use water. It's a water-based paint. I thin it down. I try to get it to be about the consistency of, let's say, reduced fat milk. And then I paint it on. As that water evaporates out of the paint, the pigment in there is going to settle onto the piece evenly or close to evenly, but you're not going to get that clumpiness. The trade-off here is for a lot of these colors, I need 3, 4, sometimes more layers of paint. So a lot of these ones, Rainbow Dash, there's a lot of layers of paint for each color. Rainbow Dash has always been one of my more expensive ones because I'm literally doing 3 to 4 layers of paint for each of her 6 colors.
And the shininess on top, is that a different kind of paint?
For the ones that are shiny, what I get is it's an acrylic gloss coat. You have to be very careful with acrylic paints. Using a standard gloss coat, sometimes that's just too harsh for the acrylic paint, and it'll cause the paint to pull up, and it'll kind of crackle. And I had to experiment with a lot of stuff, so I've ruined a lot of finished paint jobs. So I finally found an acrylic gloss coat, and I found it at my hardware store, and it's literally like $5 for a can of it, and it's a spray paint, acrylic spray paint. Go figure, they've actually got it. And yeah, and then again, because I'm doing everything separate, I'll spray paint just this. But for other characters like Daring Do, where I've done extensive modifications to the body of the pony, I tape off the portions that I don't want to be gloss coated, and then I'll spray the pony. So it's really how much effort you want to put into it, and yeah, the shininess, gloss coat. Yes? I'm not currently selling. I'm actually transitioning away from resin casting to 3D printing. So my future sculpts will probably end up being computer designed and printed. And at that point, I'll probably end up vending again. I usually sell do-it-yourself kits, which is basically unpainted manes and tails, so you can customize your own. I usually sell these for about $15. And then the custom finished ponies, because of the time involved with painting and finishing them, they range from about $80 to $125. Yes?
Now, do you brush paint them, or do you airbrush them?
I brush paint most of them, but there are few particular ponies, like Rarity, who I will use an airbrush on because I can get the gradients in her hair better. So it's really based off of the airbrush. It's a very fragile coat of paint, so it doesn't stand up to wear and tear. So even if I'm airbrushing Rarity, I put down base coats with the paintbrush, with the thinned out paint, 3 or 4 or 5 layers depending on the color, and then I go back and I'll airbrush a secondary color to give it the gradient effects.
Okay.
But yeah, the airbrush is a powerful tool, but the layer of paint that it puts down is super fragile. It doesn't stand up to any wear and tear, and I'm all about playing with the toys. So as much as these are collector pieces, all of these get played with, and if you look at my DeviantArt or my Twitter or anything like that, I totally mess around with them. They end up being broken. I have to fix them. You know, half of them up here probably have had their tails broken off, but that's just because I don't put stuff up in display cases. You know, the fact that I've got 2 cats that destroy them, just it happens. It happens. They're still toys. They're meant to be played with. Yeah.
Do you change their eye makeup too?
Yes.
Like, what would you suggest I use to take off the original?
I've done 2 things. One, like on DJ Pony here, I've used a little tiny paintbrush. DJ Pony had Rarity as a base. Rarity's got the violet blue eyes. DJ Pony has magenta eyes. I know everyone wanted red, but it's officially magenta at this point. And so I used the tiniest paintbrush I could find, cut off about half the bristles, and I hand paint the color over.
Oh, just right on top of the
Right on top. And again, it's slightly thinned down, super tiny details. And I did this DJ Pony in a set of about 12 of her. So I was literally like hand shaking, going blind afterwards because I just painted 24 eyes magenta. And basically I'm just trying to reproduce what it looks like. And if you want, feel free to come up here and take a look at her eyes, and you can't even tell that they used to be a different color. She did. And then the other hard part, of course, is painting the gradient on her glasses, which again, when I got the airbrush, super good. Yeah, I can't say how much I love my new airbrush that I got. But I used to hand paint the gradients, and that's difficult to make look good. Airbrushes make certain things very easy. The other way that I'd repaint eyes, I've done some customs, which unfortunately I don't have any examples of, where I've completely repainted eyes. And one of the things that I'll do is you basically have to take a little bit of acetone on a paper towel. You just dab a little on. A little bit of acetone goes a long way. It's a harsh chemical. Parental guidance is recommended. Nail polish remover doesn't work so much. The chemical in nail polish remover that removes paint from the pony toys is acetone. I just go to the hardware store and I buy acetone. Dab small amount on paper towel, one little wipe. If you have any paint on there, again, you repeat the process. A little dab, quick wipe. You don't leave the acetone on the plastic. Acetone will destroy the pony toy. And then you basically have to take a picture. What I do is I print out a picture of the eye that I'm trying to paint, and then I just slowly start lining it as far as where I want to have it. And let's see here, like on this toy here, you can see the toys have an indent where the eye's supposed to be at. You can ignore that if you want it to be more show accurate. The toys, the eyes are smaller than what the cartoon counterparts are. Or you can just use that as a guideline. And then I just slowly start painting it. And if I do it wrong, it's acrylic, it's water-based. If you mess up, a little bit of water on a paper towel, you can take that wet paint right off. The bad part is if you screw up, usually if you want it to look really nice, you have to start from scratch totally. So I usually don't completely repaint the eyes unless it's a special gift for someone, which I do on occasion. I forgot to mention how I do some of this stuff, and I want to show this. I want to talk about references. So here's a collage of several screenshots, and this is going to be your best reference ever. I also have a picture of surprise in here done by an artist because I had a surprise I was working on. So screen captures are your friend. You can pull them, take a quick screen capture when you're watching the show on YouTube or Netflix or something like that. But when I first started, one of the mistakes I made, let me see which ones I have here, is I downloaded some pictures from DeviantArt of someone else's interpretation in 3D of what the pony hair would be like. So I was interpreting an interpretation of someone's 3D design. It doesn't work well. Always refer to the source material unless you're doing something special, because the source material will always be most accurate. If you're doing an OC, it's your imagination. My favorite sculpt that I ever did was DJ Pony, because at the time I did the sculpt, we had all of maybe 3 seconds of animation of DJ Pony going, music in the background, and she's bobbing her head. That was it. I had total freedom of design past one screen cap. And what I came up with still looks better than almost all the toys out there. So, and I'll give everyone an opportunity to come up here and look closer at these, and this is, of course, I have to brag, and the sunglasses are removable. Any more questions? Yes?
How do you take screenshots on the computer?
Is it control print screen?
Just print screen.
Just print screen? Yeah.
Or if you're not Word, it's just a capture.
Yeah. I have a Mac. I don't know how to use it. Yeah, yeah, clueless. So we've got lots of resources here. If you Google search it, you'll find out how to do the screen capture. Yeah. I do recommend printing out your resource page, because when you're sitting here with your pony in front of you and your clay in front of you and you're trying to look up and and do all this all the time, it doesn't work. You sit here, work right here, and everything's right in front of you, because otherwise your neck starts to hurt, and you get a headache, and then you're just like, I don't want to do this anymore. So, ergonomics is important. Yes?
Could you explain briefly what the resin casting is like?
Yeah, with the resin casting, I mean, I make all my sculpts so I can remove them. This is the difficult part. Trying to bake a piece that's supposed to fit on a pony when it's not on a pony is very difficult. But what I do is, and I don't, actually, pull some of these out. So I take my finished sculpt, which I've prettied up as much as I possibly can, and I promptly start gluing lots of little pieces of plastic to it. I usually have one plastic sprue that's going to be an injection site for the resin, and then I have lots of little smaller ones which are going to be places for air bubbles to vent out. So the idea basically is you have to think of liquid coming down one of these, then everything filling up, and there needs to be space for all the air to escape so you don't get air bubbles. It's a very imperfect science. This is more of an art form, and I learned the hard way on a lot of this stuff. A lot of the sprues and stuff are off this piece here, but every single, let's see if I can find a better one. Here's a mane and tail for Trixie. So you can see liquid comes in, fills everything up. I think I'm missing one sprue right here for the air to vent. And then everything rises up in here, hits the surface. I stop injecting resin into it, and then I let it dry. Same thing with the remain. Resin casting isn't the hardest part. Creating the silicone molds is the super hard part. For a lot of stuff, when you're doing molds, you do like a two-part mold, you use clay, you break it into pieces. Well, the tails, that would be fine, except for maybe Rarity's tail, but the manes are very complicated shapes. Getting a two-part mold and making one half at a time, it just doesn't work. So what I do is I do a solid block of silicone around this, and then I use an X-Acto knife and I cut everything out. And then I have to be able to reassemble that, and I usually have some of the same Shish-Kebab skewers. I put them in the silicone so that I have alignment pins that I can put into that silicone block when I'm doing this. And yeah, it's really something that you can't learn without messing up over and over and over again. The fact that I was able to get away with it and learn so much as fast as I did was primarily because I have a friend that does costuming, and he does resin casting for a lot of the small parts. So I learned through that, but then I had to adapt everything. So it's very complicated and very messy. Don't spill resin on your carpet when you rent. Are there any particulars about that you're interested in that I can explain a little bit better?
Not right now.
Okay. I'll be here all weekend. Feel free to find me in the hallway. I can talk all day about it. I just don't know if, what people are interested in. Any other questions on stuff?
Well, one other question.
Yeah.
Can the clay be hardened just by, say, leaving it out or blow drying it?
Polymer clay, because it's actually a type of plastic, not usually. If you want something that'll air dry and harden like that, you can get epoxy clays, and it's going to be like a two-part clay that you mix together, and it'll dry in 24 hours or so. So look for the different types. The Sculpey, sometimes little pieces will eventually dry out, but usually they have to have like direct sunlight or something on them, something that's going to warm them up. But for the greater part, I've had this block of clay, and it's literally just wrapped in plastic. It's not airtight, but it's been sitting around in my workspace for probably 2 years, and I haven't used it, and it's still squishy. So you just have to warm it up. The heat of your hands is enough to soften it up. So it'll go bad eventually, but not very quickly. Any other questions? I'm very happy to have anyone who wants to look at the figures closer come up here. Oh, yes. Tammy, hi. The most complicated pony that I've made, as a finished product, Daring Do. And for Daring Do, she's got Rainbow Dash's mane and tail, but I ended up sculpting some folded wings. It's an Applejack base, so I sculpted the wings, I sculpted the shirt collar, and I sculpted the cuffs and the pocket. So basically, it's a ton more pieces. And then once I sculpted all that, and I had to take it carefully off the pony, and I actually set it up as a resin model kit. So it looked like a little plastic model kit. It was on a little tree with all the different pieces on there. And if you really want to see what that looks like, you have to go bug Andy Price, because he builds garage kits, and I gave him that as a gift. So he's an artist, Ellie. He makes the comic book. So Daring Do is the most complicated. She's got a change in eye color. I had to hand paint the cutie mark. This Daring Do probably took me a weekend to make. And when I say a weekend, that was after all the sculpting was done. It's just assembling and painting all the pieces. So something like Pinkie Pie, where it's one color, not very long. Daring Do, 6 different shades of gray, 2 other types of green, and then some other colors, and then, again, separate hat. A lot of work, a lot of layers. So she's the most complicated that I've ever done. After that, DJ Pony, sculpting sunglasses out of clay that are that tiny. Not fun. They broke multiple times, and they finally had to be reinforced with different little pieces of paper clips embedded in them. Yeah. So if there's any other questions, I'm happy to answer. Also, like I was about to say, I very much want to invite all of you to come up here and look at this. Feel free to pick them up, look at them. And if you have any other questions, just hit me up. I'll be here all convention. And I just want to encourage you all, if you're interested in this, just give it a shot. It's easier than you would think. So, yeah.